I should say something up front. I have a problem with elite educational systems. Yeah, I know, shocking. And there's a reason for that. And part of it's a personal thing. It is. I'll tell you, there's a grievance. Got me a grievance. Back in the day when I was kind of exploring myself and who I wanted to be, and I realized that I liked intellectual pursuits and I liked reading about government and law. I liked study. I liked learning things, unlike in school where I was resistant to this because it was being pushed on me. And I realized that God had given me an intellect that enjoyed this stuff. I went and sought to go get a head start in college because I dropped out first year of community college. After football was over, I was over. And I went and took a test to CLEP, to get credit for life experience. So I had to take these tests, and it determined what level of knowledge I had, and I had a conversation with the counselor at this college, and she said, hey, this is awesome. You already have you got a knowledge level of a 4-year degree. There's a couple things you need to learn, but basically you already have a college degree based upon the tests and responses to this, and so we can get you a college degree in under a year. Awesome, I'm in. Let's do this thing. All right, so here's how much it will cost you for the credits that we're giving you. What? What, you want me to pay you for what I know? Yeah, it wouldn't be fair otherwise because all the other students have to pay, but all the other students learned it from you. I learned it by independent study and working in the real world. That's just the way it works. Do I even get a discount? Yeah. No. You only pay 75% of what they paid. But I taught it to myself. Well, there was that. Then there was also the time when I delivered a lecture at NYU. And I was invited to do that. I used to do guest lectures at UCLA Anderson School of Media and their MBA school, et cetera. And I gave this lecture, and this teacher or this professor came up. She goes, oh my gosh, it was thrilling. The students loved it. You got great reports. Let me ask you a question. She goes, I don't know what Microsoft pays you. But if we could even get near that, would you ever consider coming here and teaching and leaving Microsoft and coming here and teaching? I said, oh my gosh, absolutely. Oh, I love that. I love interacting with young people, and I love sharing knowledge. And oh my gosh, that would be a dream. Here's the deal. I don't have a degree. She goes, that doesn't matter. We can get you a degree super quickly. And so what was the last year in college you had? First year of community college. Oh. I said, that changes everything, doesn't it? She goes, yeah, it does. And she went, wait, this doesn't say anything good about my profession. I go, doesn't. Because all of a sudden, that wasn't a great lecture. So I have a challenge with elite institutions. I also have a challenge with Harvard in particular because it's utterly corrupt. And President Trump doesn't want them to have $9 billion of our money. And this announcement happened the day I went into the bank to pull $34,000 of my hard-earned money out of that bank so my wife and I could pay our taxes. I don't want to pay the taxes because our government is corrupt. I take very little in government resources. I don't want the government to provide a lot of resources. But if I don't pay this, then I go to prison because my name's not Hunter Biden and because God said, pay the taxes. Jesus said, give to Rome what's Rome's, given to Caesar what is Caesar's. Given to God what is God's. I'm ordered to pay the tax. I pay the tax. And part of it goes to Harvard. Harvard has succeeded in forcing me to give them money despite their massive endowment, which I think now is like $70 billion or more dollars. They have succeeded in forcing you to give them money. You who never went to school there. The fact is, Harvard could afford on carried interest on that endowment, on carried interest alone, the principal never dropping. They could pay their staff, and they could have people come to college literally for free. But then their endowment wouldn't grow. And who cares? Why do they need their endowment to grow? Why do they need it to be $140 billion? They're a financial, they are a financial institution. They're supposedly an educational institution. So President Trump has seen fit to take from them $9 billion of our money. And I'm going to go through a ton of reasons why I support all of this. A ton of reasons. Right after I point something out to you. That check I had to write is a check you write. You probably don't write checks. It's probably taken out of withholding. And we supposedly have all these retirement systems built up for us, Social Security, et cetera. Do you understand to the degree that our finances are based upon absolute corruption? From the conjuring of money that's called quantitative easing, this is just pretending stuff is money, to the Treasury illegally spending that pretend money to purchase real assets on behalf of great big companies illegally. So much of your retirement and mine, well, mine used to be, yours might well be exposed to 90% of it is puffery, sugar high stuff. If you're 5, 10, 15 years from retirement and the sugar high hits the sugar crash, you could be in big trouble. Retirement doesn't happen. So here's a simple, easy way to find out where you're at with no obligation, no hard feelings if you don't end up working with them. Just get in touch with Zach Abraham, Chief Investment Officer, Bulwark Capital Management. He will put you on his schedule. He's happy to meet with you in person, on the phone, via video, you and your spouse, however you want to do it. It's super easy. Go to knowyourriskradio.com. KNOW, knowyourriskradio.com, and Zach will make that happen for you. Bulwark Capital Management is an investment advisor, representative of Trek Financial LLC, and SEC-registered investment advisor. Investments involve risk and are not guaranteed. Past performance doesn't guarantee future results. Trek 25-137. Christopher Rufo, a guy that the left shouldn't have angered. You know, all he was doing back in the day was running to be a city councilman in the separate country of Seattle. That's all he was doing. I mean, he's a brilliant, brilliant man, but that's what he was doing. So they decided to dox his wife, who's Asian. And they decided to race shame her. So Rufo stepped out of the race and people said, oh, he's a coward. No, he said, oh, okay, you want to play? Let's play. So he took his elite education, which has worked for him, and he turned his target on elite on the left and the culture wars, they're called, which are no such thing. You're either in the war or you're not. And he posted this about Harvard. Harvard hosted racially segregated graduation ceremonies for every group except whites and Jews in violation of the Civil Rights Act. The president has every right to withhold funding until Harvard stops practicing racial discrimination and desegregates its programs. Affinity celebrating and honoring graduates with disabilities, with indigenous graduates, African-American graduates, Hispanic graduates, everybody but white people and Jews, because, well, I mean, Jews. Harvard has allowed its campus to become a center for anti-Semitism. And look, you can, in fact, hate the country of Israel's government. Please don't, because we're called to love our enemies. And if you consider the government of Israel to be your enemy and you're a Christian, you have to love them. There's also the inconvenient fact that the Lord has an everlasting covenant with the Jewish people. There's going to be a remnant of them who turn to Jesus. That's promised. So there's that inconvenient fact. And we're called to pray for them. But Harvard, you don't even have to like Israel to know that they're allowing people to propagate hate against a specific group of folks. We'll get to that. There's also the admissions. Harvard is obviously rigging the system to make sure that fewer white people get in. They have bragged about this. They succeeded in winning a lawsuit because our court system is corrupt, but look at the admission rates. Harvard admission rates and disparities in the 10th decile. Black people, a plus 41.5% in comparison to the population. Hispanic plus 16.7%. White plus 0.7%. And Asian people minus 1.9% in comparison to the population. Or not the population, but the people who apply to get into school. They went on a war, a jihad against Asian men. And the way Harvard did this was very clever and very cynical. After they were called out on it, they started to have a personality test. So how did they achieve that personality test? You flew to Harvard, you went out and you hung out with people, you went bowling or whatever elite people do for sports. You go sailboating or play the cricket or whatever. That's not what they did. You wrote a paper. And then someone read the paper. And then someone came back and said, they're not a cultural match. They're not going to enrich the culture. They don't have enough, they're not social enough. They did that to block Asian men from getting in. And I had to go into the bank and take $34,000 out of our account and give it to the government. One of the reasons why is because Harvard demands their $9 million, $9 billion. We're forced to fund organizations we don't like for services we can't use. I can't get into Harvard. Right? So I just proved that. I have the equivalent now of probably a master's degree. I can't get into Harvard. But we're forced to fund it. Harvard thinks they have a right to this money. And all we're telling them is, hey, look, go be Harvard. Just don't use our money to be Harvard. You want to be a racist organization? Go do it. A reporter asked President Trump about this, about Harvard. Are you considering changing the tax status of Harvard?
I think Harvard's a disgrace. I think what they did was a disgrace. They're obviously anti-Semitic, and all of a sudden they're starting to behave. But when you see what they were saying, what they were doing, when you see the way they took care of events, when you watch that woman, that horrendous president that ruined the image of Harvard, maybe permanently, in Congress, in the halls of Congress, when you take a look at what happened there, it was horrific. And, you know, I've looked at a lot having to do with it. I'm not involved in it. It's being handled by lawyers. I read about it just like you did. But tax-exempt status, I mean, it's a privilege. It's really a privilege. And it's been abused by a lot more than Harvard, too, by a lot more than Harvard. So we'll see how that all works out. I don't think they've made a final ruling. I don't believe they've made a final ruling, but it's something that these schools really have to be very, very careful with. Very anti-Semitic when you take a look, whether it's Columbia, Harvard, Princeton. I don't know what's going on, but when you see how badly they've acted, and in other ways also, so we'll be looking at it very strongly.
There's, of course, the fact that some of these campuses were seized by activists with permission of some of the professors, participation of some of the professors. There's the instances of a Jewish professor being blocked from going on his campus despite having his ID, and senior members of the staff there watching this go on. There is the fact that on the Harvard campus, students tore down the American flag and replaced it with the flag of Hamas, which is a recognized terrorist group. That's free speech, but we don't have to pay for it. You want to promote those ideas? That's your right. It's our right to say we don't promote it, and in fact, it's the law. That's what the civil rights laws are about. You don't get to use federal money to discriminate. President Trump said that in the Oval Office, and he also posted something on Truth Social. Everyone knows that Harvard has lost its way. They hired from New York, Bill D, and Chicago, Lori L, at ridiculous high salaries and fees, two of the worst and most incompetent mayors in the history of our country to, quote, teach municipal management and government. These two radical left fools left behind two cities that will take years to recover from their incompetence and evil. Harvard has been hiring almost all woke, radical left idiots and bird brains who are only capable of teaching failure to students and so-called future leaders. Just look at the recent past at their plagiarizing presidents who so greatly embarrassed Harvard before the United States Congress. When it got so bad they just couldn't take it anymore, they moved this grossly inept woman into another position, teaching rather than firing her on the spot. Since then, much else has been found out about her, but she remains in place. Many others, like these leftist dopes, are teaching at Harvard, and because of that, Harvard can no longer be considered even a decent place of learning and should not be considered on any list of the world's great universities or colleges. Harvard is a joke, teaches hate and stupidity, and should no longer receive federal funds. Thank you for attention to this matter. Now, that's President Trump, but he disagrees with another man, a man, of course, of peace, reconciliation, a man whose favorite saying was, pick a target, isolate it, cut it off from its support base. Yes, Barack Hussein Obama led a protest at Harvard in 1990 in support of then Professor Derek Bell.
And one of the persons who spoke at that orientation was Professor Bell. And I remember him sauntering up to the front and not giving us a lecture, but engaging us in a conversation and speaking the truth. Now, how did this one man do all this? How's he accomplished all this? He hasn't done it simply by his good looks and easy charm, although he has both in ample measure. His scholarship has opened up new vistas and new horizons and changed the standards of what legal writing is about. Open up your hearts in your minds to the words of Professor Derek Bell.
Again, that was Obama's right, and Derek Bell decided to protest with an unpaid leave of absence from Harvard, and this happened in 1990. Harvard Law School had 60 tenured professors. 3 of them were black men, 5 were women. None of these women were African-American women, and displeased with that, he decided to go on an unpaid leave of absence. His right. And that's one of the least of the things that Barack Obama has done to damage his country. Harvard does not have any right to this $9 billion. They decided to forfeit that right in perpetuity, I think, when they became a tool to indoctrinate rather than teach. And they've made the decision. Nope, we're going to continue to segregate and teach racism, and we don't care what the Civil Rights Act says. The Supreme Court should swiftly say, money's gone, bye-bye. But John Roberts, we'll see.